I'm ready to go.
Good afternoon. Charlotte Middleton is a ceramic artist from Southern Maine. She holds a BFA in sculpture and education from Wheaton College in Massachusetts, and she will soon have an MFA from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. She apprenticed with Ellen Shankin in Floyd, Virginia for 2 years, where she experienced the most valuable education in what it takes to be a potter. She has garnered numerous fellowships and awards, including a Hickson Lead School of Art Creative and Activity Grant, and most recently, the Freeland Scholarship Award for Meritorious and Creative Work. She has held residencies at prestigious institutions, including Watershed, Haystack, and the University of Georgia's Cortona campus in Italy. Her writing and her work have been featured in prominent publications such as Pottery Making Illustrated and Ceramics Monthly. I'm delighted to introduce Charlotte Middleton.
Thank you, Pete. That was so thoughtful. Hi, everyone. There's a lot of faces. This is such a privilege to be speaking to you all here tonight. This artist talk will begin with some early work and some formative experiences, and then it ends with the current body of work, which is on view upstairs for the birds. So within the first 3 minutes of this artist talk, I do touch upon grief and an experience with drug addiction. And if those are topics that are challenging for you, I talk about them in the first 3 minutes. So if you want to step out, please do. Just know that that's coming. Okay. So I grew up in an old farmhouse in rural Maine, and I became aware of the potency of materials and the complexity of the universe of domestic space. My great-grandmother Nancy had powerful hands, hands that sowed seeds and quilts. She had hands that slapped and scolded and washed feet. The quilts kept me warm in a house that always felt cold. Thousands of squares came together to form this warmth, and this was the language of the first formative body of work, Roots and Worn. Roots was an embroidery piece consisting of my brother's, mother's, and my hair, embroidered into a baby bunting and the bra I was wearing of my college boyfriend at my college boyfriend's graduation party, where he received a sum of money, which would ultimately lead to his overdose. Worn is a braided rug, doll, and quilt that I still use. These objects tread the handiwork of my great-grandmother and the many women who make something out of nothing. Grieving turns your world and the objects inside it upside down, and this body of work was an outlet and a method of transforming material in order to make sense of and understand identity and loss. All of the clothes from before Jordan's death were cut and sewn into this quilt. My prom dress, soccer jersey, sweatpants, and jeans. All of these clothes were the architecture of my intimate life and accompanied me through joyous and trying times alike. The installation of the work stands in for a bedroom, complete with the closet of clothing. Each article of clothing was photographed, and then on the back of each photograph was a description of what happened in my life during the time I was wearing that object. My last non-ceramic sculptural work informed my methodologies and my decisions to work with pottery. 96 hours is an installation of forms that stand in for each hour that passed from the time of Jordan's death to when his body was found. The work is subtle, hiding in plain sight, the way our addictions do. Eventually, the college asked me to remove this work, and these leaves decomposed in a Home Depot bucket in the corner of my parents' garage. These works and ideas influenced how I thought about public art and how it could exist. After leaving Wheaton, my professor, Kelly Goff, asked me about what I would do next. I thought about how to make public art more intimate and accessible, and how the language of pottery is inherently connected to the body, a handle to lift, a lip to sip, The year after I graduated from college, I worked 6 jobs that taught me about the power of care and craftsmanship. I worked as a nanny, I taught preschool, I worked on a vegetable farm, I got a grant to study women's work in Mexico, I became a certified yoga teacher, and I moved to Virginia to apprentice with Ellen Schenken. I apprenticed with Ellen, who showed me the kind of life I wanted to live and taught me everything from how to do my taxes as an artist to how to grow a garden and make pickles. Ellen learned from Gwen Hansen Piggott, Val Cushing, and Wayne Higby, who learned from Bernard Leach as well as Michael Cardew. Unknowingly, I became part of the Western pottery movement, which prioritized domestic concerns and craftsmanship. The work at the time reflected my priorities. I was voracious to make a material sing. I was interested in the integration of surface and form and utility, and ultimately I needed to sell this work and pay my rent. I learned how to stack a 45 cubic foot kiln once a month, then send that work to galleries, then take a day off and stay in the bathtub until the water was cold. I learned what my body was physically capable of and how to use it as a tool. I learned that pots work for a living. Without titles or artist statements, their voice is quiet and subtle, yet enduring. I also learned through this craftsmanship process and through craft shows that what people saw was the surface and often me, another body shaped by cultural requirements. My mentor, Ellen, writes, along with pitchers and covered jars, I am constructing the very manner in which time passes. She also reminded me daily, in between running glaze tests or unloading kilns, everything you do, every decision you make, either contributes or takes away from the work. And this meant the pottery, but it also meant my life and my decisions in my life. It felt vital that I continue my education in ceramics to understand the context for the work and what I was physically taking from the surface of the earth to put on tables and in cabinets. I came to UNL to study ceramic history and processes from honestly the best professors in the country, Pete, Margaret, and Eddie. Max Warburg writes in an essay on things, culture will come when every man knows how to address himself to the inanimate, simple things of life. A pot, a cup, a piece of calico, a chair. Culture will come when people touch things with love and see them with a penetrating eye. It is only through things that one discerns himself. We can understand cultures through the objects they had. We can understand the individual through the objects they used and where and how they placed them. The majority of my research in graduate school has been devoted to studying the objects within the traditions of still life painting in England, Italy, and Spain, and those artists concerned with repography, which is my new favorite word, from the Greek ropos, meaning trivial objects, small wares, trifles. This work pictured is from my first semester when I explored wheel throwing possibilities and altering work to create forms that were still lives in themselves. The glazes I designed in the invaluable course offered here at UNL, clay and glaze formulation, are traditional stoneware magnesium matte glazes. The base glaze is a slightly altered liner glaze. It's a recipe from the 1970s, and its original intention is to protect the wall of the pot, but not visually enhance its aesthetic qualities. I have seven versions of this base glaze with different colorants, and I developed a process of layering, blending, and strategically applying the glaze to mix these 7 and have infinite possibilities in both color and texture. When fired in different atmospheres or temperatures, these possibilities double. For 2 years, I've been studying these 7 glazes by firing kilns unevenly to produce a variety of results with the same glaze combinations. So much of my work in graduate school, especially the first 2 years, involved surfacing objects with wallpaper patterns in order to place them in a domestic setting. To focus on surface design, I kept the forms primarily vacant of form language, which in turn evolved into ideas about familiarity and recognition. Cup, pitcher, vase, bowl, teapot. I continued to follow interests in the metaphors visible in the vessel rather than through formal expression. The pitcher with hips, shoulders, and handles is so often compared to the curves present in a woman's body. Oops, excuse me. I wanted to take that anthropomorphization and expose it. The forms are taken from the closets of European still life painters, but pared down to their essential, more subtle, naive, and restrained qualities. I look at Vallejo-Coster, Zurbaran, Morandi, Cotan, Velázquez for compositional arrangements and subjects. Like these artists, I often come back to the same forms to reiterate and amplify certain themes and concepts about value, daily use, and the implied narratives that accompany work even without the presence of a figure. I am interested in the tasks each object is intended to perform and keeping those assumed operations at the forefront of my formal concerns. This landscape painting, The Fall of Icarus, by Peter Bruegel the Elder, reveals the essence of familiarity I find so compelling. Here in the image, you see the fall of Icarus, just his feet in the bottom corner. And what becomes visible is the effect of the everyday life, and in fact, what runs the world. Repetition, unconsciousness, the sleep of culture, the forces that stabilize and maintain the human world are habit, automatism, and inertia. So For the Birds is a homogenous material exhibition of porcelain pottery that explores the relationships between expectations of and roles placed upon women and pottery. Using traditional craft processes, still life imagery, and the language and limits of porcelain clay, I create arrangements that expose the viewer's assumptions of both women and pottery. Pottery, pitchers, cups, and vases is a product of anthropocentrism and anthropomorphism and can be entirely taken for granted. Their role is assumed and unquestionable, to serve. The language and expectations of these objects are the medium that I build with. The first piece in the show is titled Brooding, and in the work, there's an amber-lit interior, and the power cord comes from the gallery ceiling. The hexagonal cabinet vaguely resembles a birdcage. The vertical structure addresses the physical presence of the viewer in their entirety, immediately engaging them with ideas of self, place, and display. The curio cabinet in itself is an object for display purposes, its primary function to keep objects of value just out of reach, to show off and create the illusion of mass accumulation. After the figure has left the scene, the objects become characters in their own right and are left to tell anonymous and leveling narratives, what remains after we've had our fill. Using the collaging of cultural aesthetics seen throughout the history of pottery, the highly functional and valuable Yixing teapots are referenced in the trompe-l'oeil stick handles and stick figures. The surface of the 29 pouring pots is ornamented in a drawn two-lip pattern, phonetically two lips, using the language within ceramic materials and processes by laying iron-rich glazes that bleed and craze into the carved lines of the surface. I illuminate the pain of girlhood. The presence of iron extends to the interior of the pot, which visually communicates the colors of our insides and physically communicates the substance. 14% iron in the glaze references the 14 milligrams of iron lost during a menstrual cycle. In their mass, they communicate abundance and accumulation. The objects throughout the show use a recurring stick motif to recount the flight of Daphne and the many other myths of women who have to transform in order to gain autonomy. In their turning on the wheel, their forms gain breadth and volume, but I intentionally restrain their potential, resulting in forms that look like they are holding their breath rather than offering it. The spouts and handles are left unglazed and raw to reference Bernini's sculpture of the same content. Like Apollo's outstretched hand, lifting the pot brings dissatisfaction. The rough, unglazed handle digs into the flesh, its weight leaving a line in the palm. The sideboard in close proximity to the wall literally places these objects on the side of the room, like trophies collected. All of the furniture in the show has been stripped and sanded, placing these objects in a raw domestic setting. In Hide and Seek Camouflage, Photography and the Media of Reconnaissance, Hannah Rose Schell describes the exposing role of camouflage when addressing a photograph of a supposed hidden figure. The presence of the stick leads us to assume that if you look closely enough at the spot to which it points, we will triumphantly discover our hiding man. But before us, there is no foreground or background, just ambiguous ground. Did the sniper not show up on the scene as well as not showing up visually in the photograph? In that event, the brush, the face paint, the carefully put body positioning, all would have been wasted. Perhaps this is a pretense of a pretense, a double deconstruction of representation. Maybe we are the ones who have been tricked, exposed, as it were. Using ornamentation to camouflage these objects amongst each other, the viewer is the one who is exposed. The stick motif is used again and again to handle these objects throughout this exhibition, as if Daphne is reaching back. In this piece, White Elephants, the objects are stripped of glaze and color, and the evidence of the stick becomes more clear. Throwing lines, volume placement, and thin rims render their form language almost unnoticeable. The clarity of forms allow the user to assume their role. Subtle gestures of the hand altering the malleable clay become evident in the undulating edges and carved handles, a nod to the taming and training of both the clay body and mind. The pots, being stacked vertically to resemble the ending of a meal, obstruct the viewer from the other participant and metaphorically reverse the hierarchy of usefulness. The title, Hills Like White Elephants, and palette and arrangement allude to the short story by Ernest Hemingway, Hills Like White Elephants, in which a fictional couple avoid the topic of whether or not the woman should go through with an abortion. The story, written 100 years ago, still feels relevant today, an era when the autonomy of so many bodies is not in the hands of themselves. The monochrome surface design employs a paper cutout technique to conceal raw clay during the glazing process, revealing literal shifts in value between glazed and bare surfaces. Often the value of utilitarian pottery comes from the roles they perform, whether it be pouring, storing, or displaying. The grass motif creates an illusion of reflection, rippling, and ideas about what is above the surface and what is below the surface. Porcelain clay is the context, content, and literal ground to be stood upon with this body of work. The recipe I use is transparent when thin, allowing light to pass through and the user to glimpse at their fingers through the wall of the pot. Porcelain contains very few impurities, the language used to describe iron and other particles that make a clay dirty. Its purity is responsible for its appearance and its character, and the lack of small particles make it prone to cracking and warping. In other words, undesirable flaws. Rearing exemplifies the strategic use of this material and its flaws. A wheel-thrown and hand-built ash bucket with wheel-thrown garlic, fish, apples, pears, and an egg rest on a coffee table. The ash bucket is primarily unglazed, save for a faux milk spill, revealing the throwing lines and seams like stretch marks, where coils were added, then thrown to build the form. The form and its contents display cracks where the clay couldn't hold itself together, save for a pink glaze applied to the stems and blossom ends of pears and apples. The grouping of objects is monochrome. The ash bucket is a recurring motif in the exhibition, one of the only few non-functional objects. It serves as a visual reference to another invisible task adjacent to the setting of the table. All of the faux consumables, which are also recurring motifs, illustrate my concerns about what is offered, collected, and taken. The iconography of this grouping references the early 17th century Diego Velázquez still life, Christ in the House of Mary and Martha. The composition illustrates two women preparing the table for a meal, while just in the other room, Christ tends to the needy. The painting exposes the places and roles of both genders and objects. In their lined, tense faces and in the gesture of an arm so adapted to its mechanical tasks as if to be virtually an extension of the pestle and mortar, the women express a life of domestic service and toil so locked into their routines of mundanity that the exalted going on elsewhere in the house might as well be fiction, a picture on the wall. Amphorae were used by the Greeks and Romans as the primary vessel for transporting and storing agricultural products. Their forms communicate their use. Narrow necks prohibit liquid from spilling, large rounded bellies hold the fluid contents, and their pointed base facilitates transport by ship, where they were wedged between slats in sand and packed upright in the hull. The objects cannot stand on their own. Their primary function is to carry and deliver goods. In this arrangement, the amphorae are scaled down to the size of a newborn human infant, then suspended and wedged in milk crates. Not fired to maturity, the clay remains porous and permeable. Drips of porcelain water leak into the glazed and fired porcelain pottery beneath them, resembling what's left on the table. The title heifers refers to young female cows who have yet to give birth. Screwed through cattle ears, their visual placement on the wall is a reference to the stockyard and animals on display. The surface design employs the palette and textures of swiftlet nests, which are made by the bird's own saliva and are becoming a popular food item for their supposed health benefits. This still life by Giovanna Garzoni honestly changed my life. In Lapdog with Biscotti and a Chinese cup, the placement of an English dog reveals training. The Chinese cup reveals the span and scope of the Medici collection. The proximity of the flies, which allude to the trompe-l'oeil tradition in Italy, to the delicately painted butterfly on the porcelain cup, shows the difference between the supposedly shadowless Chinese manner of painting nature and the illusionistic European manner. This still life demonstrates the influence of trade and ideas about conflating and layering techniques and skills, and brings up questions about which skills hold more value. The philosopher and art historian Ananda K. Kumaraswamy discusses both the history and purposes of surfacing design objects in his essay, Ornament. He says, song and meaning are thought of as indissolubly wedded, just as in all other arts of whatever kind, there was originally a radical and natural connection between form and significance without divorce of functioning meaning. To wish to separate the object from its social meaning and its role, to see it, to admire it, and to only seek out its aesthetic side, that is to remove from the memories of the art its sense, its meaning, its reason for existence. In this philosophy, ornament is the art of making the object more itself, imbuing the object with more characteristics to define it. In the context of pottery, I employ surface design techniques that bind the surface to the form. The Sanskrit word bhusana translates to ornament, but is an extension of the word bhu, meaning to become. In the piece Ewer and Basin with Sky, these objects stand in for bodies, becoming personified references to the 15th century diptych of Federico da Montefeltro and Battista Sforza by Piero della Francesca, in which Battista Sforza's portrait is post-mortem. Their forms, a bucket to hold ash and a ewer to pour water, reference life and death. By obscuring the raw clay beneath drawn and painterly surfaces, the hierarchies embedded within craft are physically carved into the form, becoming of the form rather than on the form. This ewer, which I saw on display at the Met, exemplifies the influence of consumerism and trade in a single object. Originally designed by the New York Faience Manufacturing Company in 1880, the decoration of the bird and butterfly amid raspberry branches is simultaneously indebted to Japanese motifs as well as those of the much admired English artists at the Worcester Royal Porcelain Company. In my iteration of this work, I intentionally leave the bird unglazed, revealing the untamable porcelain clay underneath. By removing the bird from the pattern, they have been set free. This is my bibliography and a QR code, which will take you to the 15-page version of my thoughts and concerns about still life and pottery and women. So do take a photo of that if you want to read all of that. But thank you so much for your time and for being here. This is amazing. Yeah. I do have a lot of thank yous, and so just sit tight for one more minute. This is when the talk turns into a 4-hour long talk. First, I want to thank the custodians, Rod, Abiel, and Vincent, and Dwayne, whose daily care of our building is a profound form of craftsmanship. I want to thank my mentors, Ellen Shankin, Donna Polsino, Sylvie Granatelli, Kelly Goff, and Mally Weber, whose influence on my work and my life in my early 20s has given me the most meaningful path forward. I want to thank my students, whose creativity and vulnerability inspires me daily. I want to thank the staff, Julia, Joseph, Andrea, Allison, Christy, and Sam. Your efforts to support the creative growth of our undergraduates and graduate students are Herculean and the heart of this program. I want to thank the faculty and especially my committee members, past and present, and who never were. Andrea Boland, Eddie Dominguez, Margaret Bowles, Santiago Cal, Pete Pinnell, Katie Anania, Sophie Isaac, and Erin Sutherland. Your commitment to the integrity of my research and work is exceptional, rare, and invaluable. Thank you. My incredible colleagues and their partners, this is when it really turns into 4 hours. You made my 3 years here feel like an endless summer camp. The meals, the studio visits, the dance parties, the potlucks, the in-between moments in the hallway. These are all the ball clay and the grog, what stands out and what keeps it all together. Yes, thank you. Yes, I love them. And then lastly, my family and friends who traveled near and far, Lincoln, Maine, Tennessee, Colorado, New York, and Virginia to be here tonight. Your presence here is both grounding and uplifting. None of this would have been possible without your unwavering love. You are all my universe. Thank you so much. Lastly, I want to thank my partner, Eddie, who in his dedicated sanding of all the furniture you'll see upstairs, lost sleep and fingerprints, literally losing his identity for the sake of my work and ideas. Thank you for giving me 8 years of sturdiness and belief and friendship in the shape of meals and Nelly walks and laundry and U-Hauls and flights and furniture. Strong and stable. I love you like a table. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, I'll see you upstairs. Max, you have one?
Well, just because no one raised their hand, those cherries were circled. Why were the cherries circled?
I didn't talk totally about that, but this is a motif of, or this is the first ever still life. It's called the Unswept Floor. It's from the time of Hadrian and Pompey. And it shows the first ever trompe-l'oeil, and I wanted to reference that in this idea of putting a pattern on a wheel-thrown surface, concealing the form, and this idea of which one is more important, the image or the object, and how can I, unite those ideas. Okay. Meredith?
So many of your pieces, the placement, you talk about Eddie with a table, is so much of it, and it feels like, its own character. So I'm curious how you created those conversations and just what your process was in placement and all of that. I also had a question about the paintings and if you did those that were on.
Yes. So the question was about the placement and how I consider where to put objects and what kinds of furniture to use. And then also if I did the paintings on the wall. And the tiles are all handmade and glazed by yours truly. And the role of the furniture was to act as a visual reference to put you in specific rooms in a house. So bedside tables and a sideboard, dining room table. I wanted the viewer to feel like they were experiencing their own memories of going into a home, but then to have a little bit of a beguiling experience where things are not quite as they seem, the way that we don't always see the things that are closest to us. Yes, Aaron.
Your handles are so surprising. They just look like they're the thing, but you don't emboss them with wood or anything. This is all just your touch.
I collected a lot of sticks and I put them on my studio walls, and then I just looked at them a lot as I was building the stick handles. I wanted to get lots of different bark textures and make it look really real and talk about the trompe l'oeil skill and those kinds of ways of making things look like something else. Okay, let's go upstairs and look at some art together. Thank you so much. Yay! Yay!